I'd like to thank you and the exhibitors on behalf of the Institute of Food Technologists Global Food Traceability Center. This is our very, very first Traceability Central. And the man right there, Brian Hitchcock, has led the effort to get this off the ground. So it's our first, like I said, first ever Traceability Central. And as I like to call it, this is Traceapalooza, 3 days of traceability. It's fantastic. So my traceability nerd self is very, very excited about this. So first up, we have Yoav Levy, whose company is going to revolutionize how we deal with food waste through better sensors and better technology. But I don't think he was originally a technologist. I think he was originally an investment banker. So I'm really curious to find out how he got into this. So I think it's going to be a very interesting story he's going to tell about how he migrated from the dark side to the light side and helping saving the world from food waste. So I'd like you all to welcome Yoav Levy. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, the IFT team. I'll keep the story on the dark and the bright side for cocktails later. All right. And we'll focus today on reducing food waste and enhancing freshness for retailers, quick service restaurants, and just a way of background. I'm the founder and CEO of EVIGENCE Sensors. And we're a company that was founded 15 years ago. And what we specialize in is printable sensors, which, by the way, you all get samples of, and our booth is over here. But these are sensors in the form of labels. And what that actually means is that at high volume, the cost per indicator is very low, which allows it to be on unit level. And that's why part of what I'll be talking about is unit level cold chain management and the importance it has to reducing food waste and to enhancing freshness to customers. So with that, we'll start. So there's a famous trick question, which is, you might have heard this question before. What are there more today, people alive or people that died over the centuries? And it's very intuitive to say, no, there are much more people who died than people that are living on the planet today. And that's the trick about it, because the answer is that there are more people living today. And if you look back to 1950, there were 2.5 billion people on the earth. And if you look forward 30 years, the expectancy is to have 10 billion. So within a period of 100 years, the population quadrupled itself over the face of the earth. And that's a little bit, the surprise about it is that in our minds, it's very hard. Can you hear me well towards the end there? It's very hard to grasp exponential growth. We kind of think linearly, and that's the reason we don't see the amount of growth that is in front of us. And the question is, how do we feed the world, not in 2050, but even in 2030? And that's what I'll be focusing some of my presentation on. So most of you are aware of the food waste problem, or the magnitude of it, which is considered one of the most highly inefficient markets today, where over $1 trillion, which is 6% of the GDP of the United States, this is my investment banking part kicking in, and these are just staggering numbers. 40% of production is thrown away. The amount of water, the effect on the environment is just staggering. And I think the world is starting to understand that this needs to be fixed, because you would never buy into a plant that makes cars and 40% of them are thrown away because they're not used. So there's no reason that we should see the food market and the waste in that food market as a part of doing business. The interesting part about it, which is a little surprising, every one of us understands the waste that happens at home, but there is substantial waste that also happens at retailers, at QSRs, and recent reports that came out show that on average in the US, the amount of waste that a retailer has internally, this is not what they sell to you, this is what they have in their internal system, is equivalent to twice their net profits from all food. I'll say that again because it's very hard to understand. The amount of annual waste that they have is twice that of the value of their net revenue from food. And hence, they understand themselves that this is an issue that needs to be quantified and needs to be dealt with. And one of the questions that I'll touch upon and explain how the sensors help is the issue of the cold chain and why we believe the cold chain today, although people do not all subscribe to what I'm going to say, is a broken cold chain. And and the importance of going down to smaller units when monitoring the cold chain. So the way I like to see it is to equivalent the cold chain to a leaking pipeline. And what you have here is water that is leaking out of the system in different places, including the manufacturer, the shipment, distribution center, and all the way to the end consumer. And what I will be talking in the next few minutes is just the piece that has the internal side to the retailers and the quick service restaurants. And I'll give you concrete examples of where this is being used today. We sell millions of sensors every month to leading companies in the US. We're not talking about the part that has to do with the end consumer. As a way of background, our company is going to be launching a consumer product by the end of the year so that you can use it internally in your home to monitor what you have in your refrigerator or your freezer and to know when it came in and when it should expire. But this is another topic not for this conference. So when we look at the cold chain, we are proposing a new category, a solution of products that are unit level cold chain monitoring. Now these sensors, and I won't get technological at all, what you see here is an example of a good and bad. These sensors are activated upon will at different places. So it could be on a manufacturing line, it could be in a store, and it could be on our stand where you'll pass by, you'll get an activated sensor that will change over time during the conference as a function of the actual conditions it is kept, which is time and temperature. So basically you have a product that has oscillations in temperature over the life of it, and whatever happens to the product happens in the chemical reaction in the sensor. The sensor, until it's activated by putting two pieces together, is inert. So it doesn't work, and only when you decide to activate it because you're packing the product or you're shipping it out, that's when the product begins to monitor the temperature and time and follow it. So the question is, why do you want to use these sensors? Well, I believe that today in the US, most big retailers understand the value of serving a fresh product to the consumers and the value of reducing waste. These two are on the same line. So the fresher the product, the less waste you have, and the better proposition you have to your consumer. I will show you in the next few slides how we actually also connect this not only as a visual indicator for your use, that you can see what the status of the product is, but you can also read it with a cell phone, allowing you to take that information from a visual information to digital information in any kind of system that you're interested in. This is a really important slide that most people are not fully aware of the strong implications of temperature on a product. And these are actual numbers, and they're products that are more sensitive than this bag of lettuce. But what you see here is that small changes in average temperature of the life of the product create a huge difference in the actual remaining shelf life of that product. And what we are saying is, if you're monitoring a truck and you think that that sensor in the truck is giving you the accurate information about what's in the truck, well, you're wrong. Because what that sensor gives you is the temperature of that area in the truck. But even within a pallet, the box that's on the outside and the box that's in the inside, not to talk about different pallets in the truck, have various temperatures that have a huge effect on the remaining shelf life of the products. So if you're managing your cold chain by just looking at the data that you're getting from the sensor in the truck, you're managing the average and you're not managing the actual shelf life, which it has a huge variance between boxes in that truck. And that's why, and we're all used to using date codes, that's why a date code is great if you can assume an average temperature was correct, but it's not. And when we buy the products and take them home, the date there is based on a certain temperature, and 99% of us do not have that temperature. We have either above or below that temperature. And as you've seen in the slide before, small changes in temperature create a very different shelf life for that product. So this lettuce could be great. And I always say that to my daughters at home, to take out the cheese, look at the date. And if the date is today, it goes to the trash can. And I'm saying to them, you know what your dad does, right? This is throwing away a product based on zero relevant information because you do not know where that product was kept. And that is a big part of why we see 40% of products being wasted, whether it's at the consumer hands or it's in the retailer or quick service restaurant hands. So I'll give you one example of how these sensors are used today to monitor freshness. Now, there are nuances between monitoring freshness and reducing waste, but this is one example of a very large global hamburger chain that wants to make sure that the buns that they're serving are fresh. And the buns are manufactured and frozen because they do not have preservatives in them and are shipped frozen to the different restaurants. And what happens is that when they're thawed, they have a limited shelf life because they don't have preservatives in them. So the question is, how do you create a system where all the buns in tens of thousands of stores are being used according to the protocol, which says once you pull it out, after a certain amount of time, you should discard the product. And if you have two different pillows of product, take out the one that has least remaining shelf life before you put the one that has more remaining shelf life. These sensors are applied automatically at the bakery at production line. Once the product goes to the freezer, the chemical reaction in this sensor stops, in essence. And once it's pulled out, then it begins again. And in this process, here it changes gradually over 48 hours to the red you see here, with different guidelines as to the remaining shelf life of this product according to the cards that you see here. And I welcome you to all to pick them up later on and take a look at them. Now, from a system that you label in store, press a button and put a label or mark the pillows, you're moving to an automatic system where the product always has a very visible, I'm sure you can see from the other side, from the back there, the green and the red, whereas if you have to look for a small date that has human error in and mishandling of it because it's done in many thousands of stores, we take that out and create a robust, compliant system where this is used to monitor freshness at restaurant level. Now, if you look at the retail, again, the numbers are staggering. Double the net profit is waste. And what we're saying to our customers is that your return on investment, if you manage to save one box, one carton, one case out of 1,000, you have returned your investment on the sensors. The next box that you save is pure profit. And they're losing on average tens of boxes per 1,000 today. So if you look at the ReFed report that came out in 2010 and highlights the numbers I was showing here, you see that the first thing that they're saying to retailers and quick service restaurants and the hospitality area is the way to deal, the first pillar, the first priority to reduce food waste is to go and hit on prevention of that food waste, which makes a lot of sense. And then you look at where the 5 major areas of savings can come from, and they are the 4, the first ones that you see here: cold chain management, inventory, improved inventory management, dynamic pricing, which I'll touch on in a minute, dynamic routing. They're all issues that are dealt with the sensors on unit level. So again, the essence and the importance of the use of these sensors in cold chain is because there is a variable temperature in every pallet, in every truck. And again, if you're a retailer, once these cartons get into the warehouse, you lose traceability of them because the pallets are opened up and they're repacked to new pallets that are intended for certain stores, and the history that you had before is vanished. What we're saying is if you put these sensors on carton level, they will go from production all the way to the floor of the store. And what that creates is, first of all, visibility into your system, which is followed by awareness. So we've seen in many stores where they get the product, the buns, for example, frozen, the first thing that they do is they put them in the freezer because they know it has a sensor on it, and this sensor is changing color. You can't just leave it outside and go and have lunch and then deal with it when you're back from lunch. So this awareness is part of how you create a chill chain that is more tight, and you extend the shelf life of the product. The awareness creates change of behavior. So one important feature is the ability to read the sensor with an app and to send that information to a blockchain system, a cloud-based system, whatever you want. And at the same time, what you can do is you can read variable information. So at the end of my talk, I think you will get some sensors, but if you don't, you can come over to our booth and we'll activate a sensor and give it to you on a card. You can download the app, and during the conference, you can not only see the change of color, you can then also see it in a quantifiable way. So you can see that the product has 16 more hours of shelf life. When you bundle that with traceability, and that's the reason we're in this beautiful hall, you get not only temperature traceability of the product, but also full traceability of the product from A to Z, and the ability to communicate with consumers, if this is a brand using it, or a store or a retailer or a QSR that has control over what's happening in all of the stores across the system. One of the advantages is dynamic pricing. What does that mean? What that means is basically that you have products that are close to the end of the shelf life, and instead of throwing them away, you want to be able to reduce their price and sell those products to consumers who understand that they need to use it now. And part of the color system allows that because it automatically allows you to discount the product based on the color. Consumers can see it and utilize the product as opposed to having it written down as waste. So it's really important for us and for you to understand that this is not one company that does it. We're a small company based out of Israel, and the UN office is in the US in the Hoboken area. We're 30 people. We don't manufacture anything ourselves. We're fabless, and that's what allows us to sell millions every month, going out to a pace of 1 million a day by the end of the year, because we outsource our manufacturing to our partners who have unlimited capability. Again, this is sold in hundreds of millions, and it's important to understand that changes are gradual and have to include the whole ecosystem. So we're talking to, of course, the retailers and the QSRs and selling to them, but we're also talking to producers. We're talking to the nonprofit organizations around it. We're talking to government and policymakers, the World Bank. And obviously, this whole team effort is what's going to lead us to reduction in waste and serving a better product to consumers. So just my last slide, and I'll open it to questions. It's a very long journey, and it has a good cause. We believe that every implementation has to be directly profitable to the party that we're implementing with. So when we're talking to a retailer, it has to be profitable for the retailer. Yes, they want the bigger cause, but it has to make sense for them. It has to be able to reduce their internal waste initially, and by that, spike up their profitability. It has to be profitable and usable for the user, for the QSR, and then when all these parties start using the product, it converges together to bring a drastic reduction in waste. We also think that these processes are gradual processes and steps. We don't expect the retailer to start day one and to implement using a blockchain mobile system. We think that first they need to see the visibility, apply the sensors on the boxes, then to create the awareness for their associates, then change behavior and inventory management processes, and at a later stage to evolve to capturing all the data from this. And most of all, what's important here is that it requires a change of state of mind of everybody in the process, and understanding the problem and understanding the new category and the new way to look at cold chain management. And I thank you very much for this, and open to your questions.
The show this week. So this is an example. Great. Great. So yeah, so if anyone has a question, I can pass this over.
Hello, sir. Can you reuse the sensor?
No. This is, I didn't mention this. This is a one-use sensor, and the cost per sensor is in the cents area. It's a few cents.
Okay, thank you.
How does the sensor feedback information live to a database, or does it have to be actually scanned every time to update?
Yeah, it needs to be scanned by a camera. And what that camera does is it takes a picture of the actual color, and it then goes to the database of this specific sensor and translate that color into a number that's relevant for the specific sensor. And I encourage you guys to download the app and try it yourselves.
I'm gonna get my steps today.
Hello. Are you interested or currently developing other kind of sensors different than this based on chemical reactions?
No, this is what we're focusing on.
Okay, you can talk. Thanks.
So just a couple questions. You're going to be at a couple shows coming up, right? Advanced Manufacturing in New York in June, and ProPack in Bangkok also in June, correct?
Yeah.
I'll get another mic.
Do you expect the sensor to go onto individual packaging, down to the retail level?
So from a cost structure, it can. It could be on a single unit that you buy in the supermarket, but we think that that's a very large step to take initially. That's a big jump for the retailers. And although the consumers would love that, the focus that we have is on the internal use, the B2B use for the retailer. Again, that goes to the last point I mentioned. It has to make sense for them now. But we think that once the retailers are very used to using this internally, and at the same time the consumer knows that something like this exists, that's the start of change of mind, and eventually it would lead to a convergence where it's on unit level for consumers. We do sell in Asia to applications where it is unit level, fresh fish that is being delivered to consumers, and the brand wants to show that the product is fresh when delivered.
Android version. Android version of the app.
I'm sorry?
Android version.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's coming soon. Unfortunately, it's only iOS now, but it's coming very soon.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry about that. The question was, what's the temperature range? I'm sorry, I'm just, So what happens in the sensor is that the chemical reaction mimics what happens to the product. And if you look at lettuce, the question, what is the temperature range, is not relevant to the lettuce because it lives in all temperature ranges. And this sensor lives the same way in all temperature ranges. It's not a threshold indicator, but when you elevate the temperature, the shelf life is reduced in accordance to what happens to the actual product.
So a quick question on the shelf life of the tags. So if I'm a CPG manufacturer and I'm producing, and I'm applying this on the line, the storage and maintenance of these tags prior to going on to the product, what's that life look like? Do they have to be activated? Do they have to be kept in temperature control prior to going onto the product?
No. So the sensors are delivered and you hold them in your warehouse in ambient temperatures in the original package. And the start of the mechanism happens at the packaging line when two parts of the sensor, it's a two-part sensor, when the two converge on equipment, that's when the process begins. And until that point, they're inert.
Gotcha. So theoretically, down the road, it may be possible to build this into a actual package, like on a form, fill, and seal line, like to have this built into the package so it's actually on the retail product itself, potentially.
Correct.
All right. There you go.
So if this product is being used on direct food contact, is it sanitary, or how do you guys guarantee that it can be sanitarily applied?
Yeah, so the product is approved for indirect food contact. So it goes on the package. It doesn't sense the product. It doesn't touch the product. It senses the temperature and energy the product absorbs over time.
Okay.
So all the materials are approved for indirect food contact. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Okay.
But thank you very much for coming. The next panel will be up at 1:15, and we'll work on this.
Okay. I hope not.
Yeah. I think I did everything there in the presentation room, but
Okay.
let's see. Also, yeah. So I would need to input something. Okay. So give me a minute.
Right. Did you ask somebody to help you?
Everything should be okay.
It's
There. I don't know. I will try, but
Okay. Well, we will.
we can. If we can try only this is the link and the username and password, that would be
Okay. We.
We'd have to go through this whole thing.
we've got
You can just leave it on. I've got them set. I mean, if it like, which one is your? What number is it? You can, but if it's easier if I just do it.
So I
And
just
it's
put it on and
just leave it on because I mean you can't even hear it unless you get like hello, ladies and gentlemen. The only rule with these things, and these are really forgiving. Just stay away from being like this close to the speaker. And you'll be,
Okay.
that's it.
This is
Hey, so I'm presenting first thing in the morning. Okay. Yeah.
I get it now. I got this.
What's that?
I'll do better next time. Passing around the mic. I get how it works now.
You got it?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, and we didn't get any feedback off the mics.
If you don't have feedback from the speakers, you're good.
Yeah, yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes ask people, the only thing you can ask for up there, that mic's a little bit more difficult. So you get pops and
Yeah.
people go put and stuff.
Yeah.
I want to make sure. So they didn't lose power.
So right by O wanted to check their presentation.
You're good.
I will ask him if he can do that over here.
What's that?
Right by O wanted to test and see if their link worked. They went to the speaker ready room and everything and uploaded it there. So if he just wants to
Don't
make
get close.
sure. They're at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, so we've got 15 minutes in between.
Yeah.
So they can test it when they in between sessions.
Yeah, they said like he did it on a Mac, and so like plugging it straight into here, worst case scenario, might help.
Ah, got it.
But I was Hi there.
Yeah.
Okay, so after this presentation, we will have 15 minutes. to
Okay,
check
so we
it.
can try. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have the same question as
Okay.
access to browser and
Yep.
coming back to slides.
Yeah. Okay.
All in speaker ready. Because this is set up as a presentation. It's supposed to be a deck, just rolled. So I don't even know if-
speaker ready, correct?
Yes, I uploaded that, but one of the slides has a link to a browser where we're gonna do a live demo. So
I don't think your networks.
Did they go through that with you?
over there it worked,
Okay.
but I don't know if it works here.
Okay. Well,
She's at 12
We
o'clock.
can't do.
yeah,
do
we'll
it
try
in
that
the
as
morning.
soon as they're done.
Yeah.
If it worked up there, you said it worked up
We
there.
can, we
It
can, handle,
worked
we
up
can get that in the
there.
morning because we're rolling. We got 15 minutes for a
Yeah,
changeover
it should
for our
work up
clients.
there. It should work
Yeah,
before we got to go.
this is
Same
not-
exact physical system.
But the-
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see after that
Yeah.
if it works.
I'm sorry I've been hassling you about it. I just really want,
Yeah,
wanted
and
to-
unfortunately this morning it was uploaded, but it didn't show up here.
Yeah, it was.
It's
kind of-
it's always
Thank
it's it works today.
How are you? I have a microphone in my hand.
You're busy. I just wanted to say hello.
Yeah, it's so good to see you.
That's good.
Oh, thanks. Stick around. Yeah, no, everybody is really excited. They're some company in particular, a council, wanted to speak with y'all yesterday. I wrote down a podcast. Something about like in Malaysia. I yeah, so they typically request it and they said they're going to stop by, but just in case you guys have it,
Yes.
write down what's their company.
Yeah.
I just forward yeah, I think they're going to start on time at 10:45. And so you want to do a Q&A or did you?
Yeah, 5 minutes and then.
Did y'all get your cherry tomatoes?
Yes. Going to side. Just grab them.
Yeah, exactly. 5. If you want to meet right back here.
So that we can.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yep, no, it's good. Not lying to you.
Probably on the last day.
You, I'm a performer. The only reason I'm here is I got knocked off my high horse. Never get you singing. But in between learning the path of getting in front of people, I just played music, but I didn't sing or perform. That was difficult, but nobody dies. And I mean, like as many mistakes and lyrics I've gotten backwards. I bought myself with a microphone right before I'm in a room full of people.
Right.
It's okay.
Well,
It's good to try to put it in perspective. I know what you mean, but I'm not a doctor.
Good morning.
To be okay.
My name is Andrew Kennedy, and I'm an advisor to the IFT Global Food Traceability Center. And thank you all for joining us. This is our first IFT Traceability Central. So, as I like to call it, Traceapalooza. And as the younger staff members call it, Traceachella, I believe is what they call it. And the person responsible for this whole central concept is right back there, Brian Hitchcock. So I want to thank him for all the work that he's put in pulling this together, and for all the exhibitors. So after the presentation, please step through this way, because we have lots of traceability companies and technology. It's pretty interesting, as you heard from the last panel. So the next group is actually going to teach us how to produce fraudulent food, evidently, according to the how-to lesson in here. They're from UK and Ireland, and the first up, we're going to have John Poole, who's the chief executive of the Institute of Food Science and Technology, and he's going to lead the first discussion. Each participant will come up and speak, and at the end we'll have Q&A for about 10 minutes. So first up, John Poole. Oh, sorry. Bertrand is going to lead off. So here you go.
Right, good morning everybody. Can you hear me? Bob, can you hear me down there? Just about. Can you hear me? Yeah? Very good. We're very, very excited to be the first one of the first edition of this event at the Traceability Central Stage. We've put together something this morning for you, and it's a tripartite activity where we have the IFT British section represented by me, Bertrand Evans, who also work for Camden BRI, and I'm the chair of the IFT British section. We have the IFST, the UK Institute of Science and Technology, represented by John Poole, who's the chief executive. And we've got the FSTI, which is the Institute of Science and Technology for Ireland, presented by Declan here, and also with Martin. What we thought we'd do today is highlight, not that I'm sure you know about it, but the food fraud is a huge, huge challenge for the industry, and it has been a challenge for many, many years. And there's been some really high-profile cases over the last 5 years that really brought this to the fore. And for us in Europe, it's been the Ballsgate situation where horse was put through the supply chain as beef. So that actually crystallized all sorts of activities. So what we're going to do is the first session will be an interactive session where John will take you through how to think like a criminal and go through some of the 7 types of food fraud activities that are going on around the world. So you can have fun doing this. And then we will spend a bit of time on 2 case studies. One from the UK, and I will present on the Food Industry Intelligence Network, which is industry-led, and it's a public-private partnership as well to fight food fraud. And the second one would come from Ireland, to do with the Food Fortress and what they've been doing over there to fight food fraud and as a shared activity to disrupt the criminal activities. Because you now have organized criminal groups, very well organized on an international scale, and you need to have a joint approach to be able to do something about it. So we're going to start with this. So we're going to start the first session. We'll have a how-to or give you some ideas of how you could do it within your own business. John, do you want to take us through this?
Thank you very much, Bertrand, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. I get the warm-up back bit. I don't know why. They've given me the fun bit to get you thinking like a criminal. Maybe that's because I can do the warm-up bit. I'm not a food scientist, but I can do the warm-up bit. Or maybe it's because they think I'm a criminal. I don't know. Let's first of all introduce you to what we mean by food fraud. And in the UK, we're governed in terms of regulatory side for food safety by the Food Standards Authority, and they have a food fraud unit which has defined 7 different forms of food fraud. So let's just run through each of these. The first one, which is on the list, is food theft. And if you like, that can be as simple as an employee who is taking food from the production line and selling it for their own benefit. It could be, of course, something such as cattle theft, sheep theft. There's certainly a lot of cases of that. And of course, that produce then still enters into the food chain for the benefit of the financial benefit of the individual. The second type of food fraud is unlawful processing. I thought I would spare you a picture of an unlawful abattoir, so I just put that up instead. An example, and Bertrand in a minute or two is going to talk about his network, which is identifying on a constant basis a lot of these cases of fraud. And one that's cropped up fairly recently on that, it is in fact a horse meat case in the Czech Republic, where there's an illegal abattoir which is pushing horse meat into the supply chain. Of course, the idea of horse meat in the supply chain is not a problem from a food safety perspective, but it is, or it can be, of course, and particularly if the slaughterhouse is illegal itself, and therefore you've got all the issues of contamination and food safety. Moving on to number 3 is waste diversion. Now in the UK, I don't know in the US, but there are now quite a number of charities who are legally diverting food which is unwanted and being able to use it, particularly for the homeless. And that's perfectly legal, because what they're maintaining throughout that is a supply chain which is still fully recognized and therefore is perfectly legal. However, what we're talking about here is illegal waste diversion, particularly in the case of, in this situation, you've got people who are going into the skips, they're taking out food and potentially selling it on. In the UK recently, a supermarket meat wholesaler was fined £50,000 for selling frozen meat which was unfit for human consumption. So it is a serious issue in terms of food safety. Number 4 on our list is adulteration, and that picture probably will be known for a lot of you because this was a major news item it's now 2008, can't believe that it's over 10 years ago, which was the Chinese infant milk formula case where they were adding melamine to the formula and resulted in the death of six babies, at least 6 babies, and in fact resulted in the death of the 2 people that were responsible for it as well. So that's how seriously the Chinese authorities took it. Moving on to number 5, substitution. I think the most common example of this, and it is well noted, is the adulteration of extra virgin olive oil. And it's fairly well known and documented that there's more extra virgin olive oil on the retail shelves than is made. That is a fairly common knowledge, and the interesting thing is this year they're reporting a 25-year low in terms of the production of virgin olive oil. Now that immediately signals, if there's a reduction in that, where is it all going to come from? Because demand doesn't automatically change, and therefore people will start substituting cheaper oils in order to add to the extra virgin olive oil. A lot of these you'll see that the fraud happens where there is value in the product. So the higher the value of the product, then the more chance there is to make money out of it. And this is a prime example. The next one is what the FSA call misrepresentation. So the picture here probably means nothing to anyone outside of the UK, but there was a very well-known comedy TV series, and in it these wise guys were trying to make money at every opportunity, and this is a picture of them actually bottling up into bottles what they call Peckham spring water, which was coming straight out of the tap. So that's a fictional version of it, but the reality of it is, just recently a report that they discovered that French kiwis, Bertrand will be very proud of the fact that French kiwis are more valuable than the Italian kiwis, the equivalent, and therefore you substitute the Italian instead of the French kiwis and you can make some money at it. So there's an example of misrepresentation. And the last one on the list is document fraud. And in a sense, this one overwrites all of the others, because for any of the others to work in a system, then you've got to end up with fraudulent documentation so that the documents look as though you've got authentic product. And that's often not the case. So document fraud will often be there alongside any of the other 6 that you've seen earlier. So that's the theory. Now we want to put you to the test. So play the game. There's with plenty of you around. What we'd like you to do is think like a criminal, because if you think like a criminal, you start to understand the mindset and you get into what could be the potential for fraud in your business. So what I'd like you to do is just link up with about 2 or 3 others. I know that hearing is probably a little bit difficult here, so you'll need to huddle a bit. But in your groups of 2 or 3, just for a minute or two, think about if you were a criminal and you wanted to make money, potentially a lot of money, what would you do? How would you go about food fraud? And of course, if you're in the food industry yourself, then look at your own supply chain. Look below, look above, look throughout the whole supply chain, and look for the opportunities in your business where you think you could make money. So just turn around in the group, talk to other people for a second or two, and just to make it easy, because I know you won't have remembered all that I've just been through, there are your cues. Are you gonna make it theft? Is it about unlawful processing, waste diversion, adulteration, substitution? Have a think how you could make money in your business other than through legal means. Okay, let's see what you've come up with. Let's see how criminal-like you are. Now I'm looking for devious here. I don't want the simple ones, and I don't, so let's go for devious. Let's go for real high value, high stakes. What have we got? I mean, we've got a microphone that's going to come around.
Yep.
Is
this on?
So,
yep.
Anyone start us off with your criminal-like activities? You're gonna start us off. Thank you, Lindsay. She's a plant, I know.
Right. Well, we're talking about maximizing our opportunity for with minimal risk. So although we talked about adulteration of things like honey, you need to be manufacturing to do that. So we thought just relabeling taking a cheap bottle of wine and sticking something that we could actually get multiple times benefit for would be maximum reward to us with minimal risk.
I like your thinking. So you're already thinking about the risk involved in this as well.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
Absolutely right. You've got to be able to get away with this at the end of the day. So yeah. So cheap labels is good, isn't it? I mean, it costs nothing as well. Over here.
We were talking about. Wow. Okay, we were talking about document fraud and how easy it is just to change that figure to get away with lower temperatures or less care taken in things, so less cleaning schedules and what have you.
Okay, of course, the pressure is within the organisation, and isn't it? The business has to get production out, and isn't it just simpler just to tick a different box and just get away with it? So it is still documentation, still document fraud, but it's within the business itself. So the business itself is the criminal. Indeed. Okay. Any more? Thank you.
So we have a couple of examples over here. Sorry, I didn't. Carol and I have a couple of examples. The one example would be agave syrup that is being substituted with sugar. The supplier saying, no, it's not. The very high quality lab that's being used is incorrect. They are not a very good lab, yet I know they are very reputable. So it's the story carries on and on and on. Yeah. And they're telling the lab that they need to redo the tests and they need to send in more samples. So yes, a very interesting story. And then
that's
Carol.
A real example by the sounds of it.
Yes, it is. It is going on.
Yeah.
And Carol has some good organic stories for us.
Well, one of our challenges is we buy a lot of international ingredients. And sometimes the organizations that certify them as organic want to use very broad terms. For example, rice protein, rather than specifying the rice protein we're buying. But these factories are handling both organic and non. And it's really difficult to get them to specify the product that we are buying so that my organic certifier will say, oh, yes, this is a good certificate. And you wonder, why do they need to be so broad? It's because you're wondering what they're hiding. But you still have to, in some measure, you have to trust, but verify. The other challenge we've got is that we keep getting asked by an international distributor of ours, we also own a printing company. Why don't you give us your printing business? And we're like, we are not sending you our labels to print in your country because who knows what kind of sawdust will end up in those tubs. And so you have to maintain really tight labels control so that genuine labels don't end up on adulterated or substituted product.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Good examples, and thank you very much. The whole issue of organic is rife for fraud, isn't it? Because how that's so difficult to be able to pick up, and if the document fraud is covering that up, very difficult. So understanding, knowing your suppliers, knowing your supply chain, and maintaining those is really important. Okay, I think we got the idea, and that's really great. We've got one more. Thank you.
So we were talking about substitution because there's only so many quantifiable tests that you can do. And something like an organic, it might be tougher to identify between the two, an organic and a non-organic. And also there's only so many tests you can do for a large, lot of product. You can only test one out of so many.
Yes.
So it gives down to chances.
Just for the record, for the police record, do you want to be specific about which product you go for in terms of the organic product? Which is going to give you good value? Just for the police record, of course. Vanilla. Yeah, it's a good example. Yeah, very good one. High value, perfect, and currently a big issue. Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to now hand over to Bertrand, who needs no further introduction, to take you through a case study from the UK in terms of of how the UK industry is working together to tackle these sort of issues.
It's frozen. You've broken the system, John. It's D. Yeah? Yeah, yeah. Oh, no. That's it. Yeah, yeah. Right, thank you very much, John. Yeah, so as we just highlighted, there are many ways where you can actually commit this food fraud crime. And I'm just going to take you through the case study from the UK, looking at the Food Industry Intelligence Network, FEED. There are a number of acronyms, but this one is FEED, so the Food Industry Intelligence Network, and how it came about and what we actually achieved by establishing this network. It came about because I already mentioned to you the Horsegate scandal back in 2013, and it really shook up the industry, and Professor Elliott from Northern Ireland was commissioned to produce a report, and as part of that report there was suggestion that there should be a safe haven where people could share intelligence on food fraud and what they found out and what they could share with other people. So it's basically creating a neighborhood watch, a mega neighborhood watch where everybody contributes their intelligence in a safe space where people, you can maintain the confidentiality of the information. It was also to make sure that all parts of the food chain were talking to each other, and also the government agencies and people that are doing the enforcement, so the Food Standard Agency that John was already spoken about. But the UK as a slight, UK and Ireland, you've got an interesting point there. Is you've got Food Standard Agency covers the UK, but not Scotland. So Scotland have got their own Food Standard Scotland. And then if you remember that Northern Ireland is part of the UK and the Republic of Ireland is a separate country and has the FSAI there as the agency. So you have a number of agencies that are involved just for these two countries. So the aim of the FEED network was to gather intelligence and to disrupt the activities of the criminals. So it was not on my patch, mate, go somewhere else. So that was the aim of setting up the FEED. So how does it work? So it was set up by the industry, for the industry. So back in 2014, after the Christian report, they all set up, this group of 21 companies, and I will show you who they were in a minute, but they all sat together and said, look, we need to get our act together, and we need to start sharing information. So how do we develop a protocol so you can actually share in a safe space that information? But that information is all your analytical tests that you perform to check related to food fraud. So it could be authenticity testing, traceability checks you might be doing, and anything you might be collecting information, intelligence related to food fraud and criminal activities related to your supply chain, or packaging, and so on. So they set up this network. There was a small membership fee, and as part of that, there's a legal privilege involved in this, because there's an agreement with Evershed, the lawyers, and the law firm collects on a quarterly basis all the analytical results of these companies into this DADI spreadsheet or system. And so the Eversheds get all the individual results from the members and anonymize all the results. And then all the results are sent to us at Camden to analyze and produce a report. So it's collating that information. So the rule of the game, you have to submit your own data to be shared with the others, and then you get all the results from the others. So these were the governance board, because obviously you need to have some kind of governance with the network. And you will see here that you've got a cross-section of the food chain. So you've got manufacturers, retailers, food service operation, and primary processing also involved in there. You have the Evershed's lawyers involved there as well, to make sure there's a legal counsel involved, and Chris Elliott, who is the independent advisor there to the board, who provides some additional information. So you've got that governance board, So what has the group achieved so far since 2015? Well, it has accumulated a huge and obscene amount of data across all these food fraud activities across the food chain of these 21 companies. The network has grown as well. We're now 45, and it starts now to collect intelligence and to be able to inform how they're going to do the sampling, what sort of activities they're going to do as a group, where to target the testing, what to look out for, and also flag up some areas of concern. As an entity, as I said, they're now 45. Again, covering the whole food chain. They have this recognition within the governments as well that they are a group of people that the government can interact with, and they've set up a memorandum of understanding with a number of the key food standard agencies, Food Standard Scotland and the Food Standard Authority of Ireland, to exchange information on a confidential basis as well. So there's a flow of information between the agencies. When they notice there's something, they can communicate that to the network via the legal counsel, and vice versa. So again, it's that neighborhood watch of passing on the information, pointing out some of the areas that might be to look out for. As part of the growth of that network, very quickly they realized that they needed to set up a technical steering group, because you've got these companies there and there's a lot of data, and you need to sort of structure all this, and what other data you need to collect, sort of metadata and so on. And also to scrutinize all the various analytical techniques that are being used. As you know, it's quite a challenge for people to use the right analytical techniques. For example, if you want to detect organic or whatever. So there's a lot of claims that are being made by a number of analytical techniques and so on, which are not really robust. So there's been a lot of scrutiny to make sure that the analysis are as robust as possible. Just to here highlight some of the other the units, the National Food Crime Unit from in England, and we haven't mentioned the B word so far, but this is it, Brexit, sorry. And in terms of the food fraud, and especially what's going on with the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, potentially there's a lot of opportunities there for all sorts of things going on, because one part will be in the European Union, and the other part wouldn't be in the European Union. So the FIN network was consulted as well in some of the many scenario planning activities that they had on what the implication might be of this. As a network, they've got a number of benefits being a member. So obviously you get all the information from the other members, but you also get various newsletters, intelligence newsletters, horizon scanning information, and also some wise words from Professor Elliott. But also all the intelligence from the regulatory agencies, so as I mentioned, FSA, FSS, FSCI, so there's a flow of information there, so you have information as quickly as possible, because often you have to act very quickly. These are some of the companies that are involved, and you will very quickly notice that, yes, they represent the whole food chain, but one of they're doing, you've got 45 companies, but we're missing a lot of the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, because all these companies are very large retailers, manufacturers, wholesalers, primary producers. So one of the objectives of the group is to get the SMEs, small and medium enterprise, a lot more involved, so they can also benefit from that neighborhood watch and that intelligence that is being gathered. So there's some discussions going on how that could happen. I mentioned the importance of having a technical steering group, and as part of that network that's maturing, again, they set it up to have a representation from manufacturers, retailers, again, to have all parts of the industry represented. And also it's very important to have independent experts in there to actually challenge the industry when they're all together, say, right, have you thought about that? What about the methods? And also you need the chair and secretariat. So there's it's a very well-structured steering group. And they've been able to look at the data that's been collated, suggest some additional data that should be collated, make recommendation of some analytical techniques that should be used when filling up the returns, and also start suggesting where people should focus and also engage with other stakeholders and parties on a global scale. So that was just a quick canter through the group and how it's structured. But this is, again, I come back to that neighborhood watch and how would you set it up. So if you went back into your businesses, how could you partner with other organizations to share that information? It's all about sharing that information, not just through the supply chain, but also with the government agencies and so on, in a safe way, so within the charities maintained, where you can act very quickly. So having this established flow and legal counsel involved has been greatly beneficial, and a lot of cases have now been solved thanks to the network and that privileged relationship with agencies. And some of the recent cases over the last 12 months have involved Interpol as well and Europol, because most of the criminal activities are on a massive scale, because there's a lot of money to be made. Okay. And one of the things about food fraud is that the sentences, if you get caught, often you can get away with it with a very small part of it. In China, we get head of somebody. Other parts of the countries or the world, the sentences are not huge, so the risks are very small. So that was my sort of case study on how the FIN network was established, and the importance of having legal privilege and the link with the government agencies and having all the stakeholders involved and sharing that information protocol. So we're going to move on to our second case study. So we've got Martin from Checkers. Oh, hello. Yes. Yes.
Damage to their brand by de-identifying the information? Is that how you get around that issue?
Sorry, I can't quite hear myself. Sorry.
So in this example, are you avoiding any concerns with parties who are being potentially named as a party of concern or that are associated with a transaction of concern by de-identifying all the information that is housed?
So what's anonymized is where the company that's submitting the information. So, but in there, they might say there's an issue with that supplier in Turkey, for example, not picking on Turkey in particular. And then there's the others will account for that activity. Yeah.
And
so the importance is that metadata, where it comes from, so you can have an action. But it's where the information comes from that's anonymized.
Okay. And you haven't experienced any legal concerns with any parties that are named being, claiming slander or some other,
so far, but I can see where you're going.
Come in. Okay.
That's why it's very important to have the legal counsel at all times, and everything goes through the legal counsel to check that that doesn't happen. I can see what you want to. Right, Martin, you're.
So, good morning. My name is Martin Danver, and I work with Teagasc. We're the Irish Agriculture and Food Development Authority, and we're responsible for research in food in the Republic of Ireland. And my role is I'm both a researcher and I'm also a head of a national reference lab in Dublin, just involved in food safety testing. So this morning I'm going to cover two areas. First of all, the Food Fortress, which is a project which Chris Elliott has worked on, and secondly on contamination of dietary supplements. Now, I work quite a lot with Chris on research projects, so we have worked with him on this in terms of the Food Fortress, in terms of the pig and poultry aspect of it. Okay. So, in terms of the Food Fortress, it's quite a complicated project, and there's a number of different angles to it, mycotoxins, heavy metals. But today I've selected dioxins. So dioxins is caused a big product recall back in the Republic of Ireland and North of Ireland back in 2008. And a lot of it was down to contamination of animal feed. In this case, it was mineral oil was substituted as for waste oil, and resulted in a massive impact on the Irish economy. I think the cost of it was 80 million euro. So in terms of the Food Fortress, it's a joint industry project, and the EMVIT has developed the most secure feed and food supply chain in the world. And it's involved in a partnership between the Northern Ireland feed industry and Queen's University Belfast, which is in the north of Ireland and in the UK. And the method was to develop a robust science-based approach to analyse the risk and develop solutions. So in Europe, we have what we call the RASAF system. So the RASAF was used quite a lot for this. So RASAF is the rapid alerts for food and feed, and a lot of information is published in this, so it's freely accessible through the RASAF portal. So at the beginning of the Fortress, there was engagement with the Northern Ireland Grain and Trade Association back in 2010, and the aim was to develop a feed register. So there was a survey and a gap analysis was carried out. And there was a new testing scheme was developed for feed companies. So basically at the time, if you picture Northern Ireland docks, there was a lot of feed coming in for different companies along the dock, stopping off at point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. These feed samples were basically analysed for the same things by each of these different companies. So the aim of it was to provide better bang for buck and pool all this analysis in one. There was a lot of wastage of money spent. So in terms of the risk ranking work carried out at Queen's, there was a hazard identification and the association of the level of risks with each of the hazards. And then there was a prioritisation of them. We've done the same study recently in the Republic of Ireland in terms of risk ranking approach. And you can rank your contaminants from 1 to 100. So in the early days, you can see here there was at the start of it, there was a questionnaire participation and low level of interest in it. There's about 8 respondees to it. There was a pilot study then gathered, and the project began to gather momentum 19. And you can see now at year 2, there's 53 companies involved in the Northern Ireland and 13 in the Republic and 4 in the Great Britain. So it's a 100% participation within the Northern Ireland. So one of the key outputs from the food fortress has been the dioxin and PCB analysis. So this is one of the most important contaminants in the food chain, and the potential impact from dioxin contamination is enormous. So here what they have looked at is compositing of samples. So if you look here on the top for ruminants, they were taking 80 samples. So as part of this pilot exercise, what they did was they analysed pooled samples of these 80 samples and then looked at the individual samples as well. And you can see here what you have is the power of composite samplings. So it reduced your cost by 4-fold. So in summary, this scheme is now in full operation. It is 100% industry participation, and it is a fully transparent reporting system for it. There were some breaches detected, but consequently found to be safe based on the compositing. And the project now is moving on. It's gathering interest in other areas. I said what we're looking at now, mycotoxins is a massive area for the project. So we're looking at multiple mycotoxins in food and feed, hundreds of compounds. We're multiple heavy metals also. So in summary, it's the most secure food quality assurance scheme in the world at the moment, and it's a fully industry buy-in from it. So I'll move on to the second part of my presentation, which is on contamination of dietary supplements. This is work we've been doing quite a bit over the last 10 years. So in terms of dietary supplements, what are the issues? You've got contamination, can occur, adulteration, where you can get a natural chemical can be added to a product. These you could have toxicity issues. In some cases, you can cause deaths. Other issues around dietary supplements is lack of standardization, incorrect preparation of dosage, and inappropriate labeling, which is a big problem within the European Union. So, in my talk today, I'm going to be talking about the adulteration of dietary supplements with synthetic therapeutic compounds, particularly slimming compounds. We've also looked at other drugs also, but not appropriate for the talk today. So here, what we were looking at was a range of known slimming products that can be potentially added to dietary supplements. And when I talk about dietary supplements, we can get a range of products. You can get tea, for example, slimming teas, juices. In some cases, it can be pills. So quite a complicated range of products. And the contaminants that you can get in these, sibutramine, which is a pharmaceutical compound, fenfluramine, which is a stimulant, is now banned. It's on the scheduled drug, and then with some licensed compounds like orlistat and even phenolphthalein, which is a pH indicator, and in the past it's been used as a laxative. So the risks posed by these, in some cases you get acute chronic problems. As I said, some of these products have been licensed as human medicines, so there is a degree of risk to them, and some of them have been removed off the market because they're very dangerous. For example, fenfluramine, which has caused deaths due to overdose. So the objective of our work was to develop high-resolution mass spectrometry screening methods for detecting these compounds, and to develop confirmatory triple quadrupole mass spectrometry methods also. So the challenge in the detection of contaminants in these dietary supplements is the availability of analytical standards. So in some cases you don't have standards to detect them, and if you're looking for potentially known compounds, you could have lists maybe of a couple of hundred drugs. So what the approach we have done with this is QTOF screening, where you have lookup lists for your mass spec analysis, and then if you detect the compound, you have to go and purchase your standard to confirm. So here's an example of an application of an LC, so liquid chromatography with quadrupole time of flight screening approach for contaminants. So typically what you do is you have a literature review. So you get your list of compounds. So in the case of slimming compounds, we're looking at about 15 drugs. We have a list of suspects. So we put these into a lookup list. We scan the compounds using TOF based screening, with not MSMS, just pure TOF. And then we apply mass filtering with a 50 ppm cut off of it. So then, if we get a positive from our first screening, we move over to our triple quadrupole method. We can also do, I suppose, on the QTOF, we can do MSMS on this also to detect them. So here we have an example of a slimming coffee. This is an adulterated product. This product was confiscated by customs and sent to our laboratory for analysis. And we screened it. We saw this peak in the positive. So at the top, you're looking at your total BPI chromatogram, unfiltered. And here underneath, then we look at a filter chromatogram, looking at the mass at 280 mass to charge with the cut-off filter applied to it. So we put this into our software and did number crunching on it, and comes up with a hit, of course, for sibutramine, which is a human medicine, banned human medicine. And we were able to use the high resolution function then to identify it based on this. So the next step then was get the analytical standards. So we have here a sample on the bottom, and on the top we have an analytical standard for sibutramine. So on the right hand side then we have the MSMS fragmentation of it. So here you can see there's quite a good fingerprint here for the molecule, and if you look at the different peaks here that are circled on both. Then we've done some follow-up triple quadrupole analysis. The function of this triple quadrupole work is to get more of a number on the sample. So in some cases, detection of the compound is sufficient. But if you want to move on to risk assessment, you want to know how much is there, what's the danger to the public from this. So the problem with triple quadrupole, of course, is you have to tune up. It's quantitative. You can also get confirmatory analysis with it through MSMS. And we set up a method for this a couple of years ago now, and it's a method for detecting sibutramine and various other slimming products. And the LOQs there on the right hand side are the 10 to 4,000 ppb range. So the levels, of course, which you find in these samples are quite huge, large amounts. So normally if we're in food safety and we're detecting the ppb, these are in the ppm levels, in some cases nearly percentage levels. So we applied this to the dietary supplement samples we analysed here. These were confiscated samples taken by customs. So they were largely internet purchases. And in some cases there were domestic samples as well that would be bought in local shops. So quite a range of capsules, soft gels, tablets, tea bags. So quite challenging samples to analyse. So from the LC top screening, these are the results. Sibutramine is the #1 residue, and we've also found we're, I think, the first lab in Europe to detect phenylphthalein in samples, dietary supplement samples, and there's other drugs as well. MDS is a structural analog of sibutramine. Yohimbine is a herbal compound. So in terms of the triple quadrupole work, you can see here what the outcome of this was, and we're on the left is the number of samples analysed and the positives for sibutramine, and the concentration on the bottom axis. So as you can see in the column on the right, the samples here, those 9 samples containing between 50 and 100 milligrams per gram of sibutramine, which is about it's a 10% of sibutramine done. So phenylphthalein was the other interesting compound which we looked at, and you can see here on this the levels of phenylphthalein were quite high in a couple of samples. They were over 10% of this. So the outcome of this is a snapshot of just one of the big seizures of one lot of seizures over, I think it was over a period of 2 weeks, where there was some like 260,000 samples confiscated by customs. And this is a coordinated action in different countries with Interpol. So I think I'll leave you with that slide, and thank you for your attention.
Good morning. We'll have some questions at the end of this very short sum up. My name is Declan Try. I'm president of the Irish Institute of Food Science and Technology. And just in summary then, I think we've well recognised that food fraud is one of the critical issues facing today's food industry, particularly in the sense that it can, within one click, can ruin large companies or small companies in terms of losing trust. From an Irish perspective, we export 90% of our food that we produce, 80 to 90% of the food. And therefore, from an Irish point of view, we do have to implement very strict standards. So we understand that food fraud costs about 40 billion globally, which is colossal, and up to 10% of the food we eat is actually contains some sort of fraud association. So some of the ways that can be used to actually overcome the occurrence of fraud is mainly to really understand the raw material, the chemistry and the microbial aspect of the raw material. To also implement a very strict analytical surveillance. And by that we mean, and I think was mentioned by yourselves already, these have to be highly robust analytical methodologies of the highest accredited standards. They can't be just look-see type approaches in order to overcome it. The other thing that we've agreed is supplier relationship is very important. An actual one-to-one contact between the supplier rather than, as we are very prone to now, on the internet and in some of the envelopes that Martin described. Supplier conduct and history and integrity is another aspect that has to be absolutely certified and known about, and that no foods producer can really take things for granted. And the last thing is supply chain transparency. That's another key issue, right? And in fact, in Europe, the EU don't recognize the food chain, they'll only recognize the food system. And the more and more we analyze the cases of whether it's horse meat or dioxin or these scandals, we realize it's certainly not a chain, it's actually a system. And it affects from farm to fork, right up to the health and the consumers, etc. So they would be the main issues. Not to mention then why it happens. And obviously we know it's a mix of opportunity, where it's prone to happen because temptation is high, and also motivation, whether it's for profit or just purely reputational damage. So I think we've seen how to do it, 7 ways of how to do it by John. We've seen really good examples from the audience, the vanilla, the organic, and the syrup. These are real live examples. We've seen 2 or 3 systems set up then from the Irish and British point of view of at least coherent systems approach to prevention and knowledge surveillance of it. And then really the main point of the whole thing is to be on top of the game, because these criminals, as we know, are ahead of the curve in many cases. So it's the next problem is what we have to address. So with that, I'd like to invite our 3 speakers up, and maybe we have time for about 5 minutes of Q&A, if you like.
Yeah, guys.
Okay, don't be shy. So if you have any even comments, discussion points, or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be really interested to hear views, because I mean, what we're really lucky in the UK. We're really lucky in Ireland in that we have the ability and the will to actually cooperate and make this happen. And I think what would be really interesting is taking that to a global scale and the challenges that are involved in trying to do traceability on a global scale, which is what this whole stage is about. So I'd be really interested to hear, your first thoughts, I guess, in terms of how do you do that? How do you build those networks on a global scale if it's going to make any big difference? It's a reverse questioning technique.
So at the Global Food Traceability Center, we've been working with the World Wildlife Fund. And in fact, we have a booth set up over there in the kiosk area on the global dialogue on seafood traceability. And seafood fraud is a huge issue. and one of the main drivers for electronic traceability. So I was just curious if you had any experience in dealing with seafood in any of your work.
Well, as part of the Fin network and the data they collect, there's a lot on seafood because it's obviously one of the big areas where things are happening. So yes, there's a lot of data on seafood there, yeah, and across the whole supply chain around the world, yeah, and there are some hot spots for sure.
So,
I know from an Irish point of view, seafood is one of its main targets, and there's a systematic approach, particularly to species and also fresh and frozen.
absolutely. In country of origin, it's been a big challenge. In fact, we had one use case where Chilean sea bass was being shipped to Canada, packaged and relabeled as Canadian Chilean sea bass. So there you go.
Yeah.
So I have a talk today about there's a big European funded project. It's jointly funded with European and China. Chris Elliott is coordinating this, and I'm working on the food safety work package of it. But as part of this, we're doing a lot of work on traceability and authenticity as well. And with our Norwegian partners, Nofima, Peter Olsen is working on particularly on the aquaculture part of it, and the aspects of food fraud and that in terms of mass balance is a key part of it. So the challenges of looking at in terms of what is caught in terms of fish and what is landed. There has been a massive case of fraud there a number of years ago. I think it was in Scandinavia, where they had a pipeline of fish being caught about a kilometre off the coast. Very elaborate fraud. So fish were caught off the coast, dumped into this pipeline and shipped in illegally. So it took a number of years before they actually caught it. So